While Lu Sheng's body was emitting a powerful blue energy, he extended his hands and his eyes began to shine with joy, causing a smile to appear on his face. The power of the masters had now fused with his body. Lu Sheng's eyes widened in confusion and his mind filled with many questions. The bodies of Yang Yishuo, Wang Hai and Duan Yifeng began to disappear with the wind, transforming into dust. Before disappearing, the three began to show a proud smile. Lu Sheng's attention focused on them and he could not help but feel somewhat confused. A strange blue energy began to swirl around his body, and Yang Yishuo mentioned that from now on, everything depended on Lu Sheng. If destiny allowed it, they would meet again. The eyes of our boy widened with sadness and surprise. He did not know what was happening. Lu Sheng closed his eyes and began to cry in sadness. Not long after, Lu Sheng fell to the ground. He could feel an ocean of energy filling his body. He closed his eyes and concentrated to channel the energy. Several seconds later, Lu Sheng opened his eyes and his attention focused on the energy that was emerging from his hand. Countless understandings and revelations flooded his mind. He already mastered 2 level 15 Daos and 1 level 16 Dao, in addition to countless Daos of other levels. His foundation in the martial path had risen to an unimaginable level, billions of times higher than before. Now he had a talent never seen before in history. With an expression full of determination, Lu Sheng tightly clenched his fists. His eyes began to shine with excitement and a smile spread across his face. Now, at last, he had the true qualification to try to forge a path, a perfect Dao that belonged entirely to him. Lu Sheng sat on the ground and decided to concentrate. His eyes were filled with determination and confidence since his power was growing by leaps and bounds. He decided to return to reality once he had fully assimilated everything. Our boy concentrated and all the martial energies began to emerge from his body. When that moment came, he was going to reach true transcendence. At the same time on Earth it was daytime, and somewhere was the mansion of Lu Sheng's family. Inside the mansion, more precisely in the living room, someone was watching television, which was showing a city in chaos. Lu Sheng's parents were sitting on the sofa. With eyes full of fear, the mother placed her hand on the father's shoulder and couldn't help but feel afraid. The father took out the remote and with a confused expression couldn't help but wonder why the planet was being invaded by an advanced civilization, realizing that the world was about to plunge into chaos. While the father was smoking and watching television with a serious gaze, the mother's eyes widened in confusion. She thought all this was a lie since the scenes looked like they were taken from a movie. Just then, a great explosion occurred, devastating the entire city. With a confident gaze, the father made it clear that Channel 1 would not make this kind of joke. Lu Sheng's sister, who was carrying her school backpack on her shoulder, arrived, her attention fixed on their parents, and with a serious gaze she revealed that classes at school had been suspended. On the internet everyone was talking about this and many videos showed that it really was an alien invasion. At the same time, with eyes shining with rage, Iji's martial spirit forcefully swung his arm, destroying everything in his path. The most powerful martial saints tried to attack, but with a simple movement, Iji's martial spirit cut their bodies into pieces, causing them terrible pain. While Iji's eyes were shining with evil, with a smile he made it clear that no one was going to be able to escape. Lu Sheng's sister approached the parents who were sitting on the couch watching television. She put her hands over her chest and couldn't help but feel fear. The mother put her hand over her chest and panicked. Meanwhile, on the other side, with a confident gaze, the father revealed that Iji's strength was at a different level from the warriors of the blue planet. With eyes full of fear and terror, the mother couldn't help but wonder if the apocalypse was about to arrive. The father's eyes began to shine with confidence, and with a smile he asked his wife not to overthink it since that wasn't going to happen. Even if heaven collapsed, someone stronger would appear to hold it up. It wasn't something they, mere mortals, should worry about. With her face covered in sweat, the mother turned toward the father and began thinking silently. She panicked and with tears in her eyes revealed that this was what worried her most. Lu Sheng now held an important position within the army. She feared that the high command would send him to fight against Iji. The father's attention focused on her, and after thinking for a while, with a calm expression he asked her to stop thinking about meaningless things since he didn't believe that even if the whole world united there wouldn't be at least one master who could defeat the aliens. He stood up and with eyes shining with confidence told her that they should trust the government. They should not complicate things for Lu Sheng. And the others? He decided to go out to buy provisions and at the same time look for a team to remodel the basement of the house and turn it into a bomb shelter. The sister's eyes filled with worry, the mother stood up and with a worried expression decided to go with him to help. At the same time, while the rays of sunlight were illuminating everything, somewhere in the Dragon Kingdom was the meeting room. With a serious gaze, Zhengyu arrived and entered the villa. A soldier lowered his head before her and welcomed her. In the villa was also Lu Sheng's former master, who had his arms behind his back. He felt relieved to notice that she had arrived. With a curious expression, Zhengyu turned her head toward him and asked how the situation was. Tan Zhongyu took out a tablet which had videos of a demon-shaped monster with wings killing humans. Zhengyu's attention fixed on it and she remained silent. Tan Zhongyu revealed that it was a newly arrived video from the Eagle Kingdom. 3 level 9 martial warriors had been defeated and more than 50 level 8 Grand Masters had been captured. His eyes began to shine with fear and seriousness when he revealed that up until now, they had already lost 5 level 9 martial masters on the Blue Star. With a curious gaze, Zhengyu put her hand on her chin and began to ponder. She suspected that this alien invader must possess extremely advanced detection devices to capture high-level martial artists so efficiently. Her eyes began to shine with seriousness when she realized that all of them had felt a strong sense of crisis lately. In times like this, when the lips disappeared, the teeth grew cold, they had to unite to face this threat together. The room was full of martial saints. The one with crossed arms mentioned that the alien invader was a true level 10 martial expert. At the same level as the guide, they were no match for Iji, and asked where Lu Sheng was. Zhengyu's eyes began to shine with confidence and seriousness. She started staring at them and revealed that Lu Sheng was in temporary seclusion trying to advance to level 9. His cultivation place was in the sea. They didn't know when he would come out, and they also didn't want to interrupt him. She knew that Lu Sheng still wasn't aware of what was happening outside. With a nervous expression, the brown-haired martial saint extended his hand and suggested asking for help from the guide since he remembered that Lu Sheng's wife, Snowy, had a communicator that could contact the guide. Just then, Snowy entered the room with the communicator in her hand. While her eyes were shining with seriousness, she revealed that she had already sent a request for help 3 days ago. The guide needed some time to arrive. He had said that they would try to gain as much time as possible. With an expression full of fear, the martial saint extended his hand and mentioned that if Lu Sheng were present, maybe they could resist. But the problem was that they didn't know when he was going to come out of his seclusion. With a confused gaze, Snowy began to think. She didn't know what to say. At that moment, someone placed their hand on top of the table. It was Zhengyu. She crossed her arms and with a furious gaze made it clear that interrupting a seclusion was a great taboo in the martial path. If it affected Lu Sheng's advancement, the consequences could be even more serious than the alien invasion. Snowy put her hand over her chest and remained silent. Zhengyu suggested trying to buy time by confronting the demonic spear until Lu Sheng came out of seclusion. The martial saints began to look at each other and let out a sigh, knowing that they had no other option. At the same time, the guide's spaceship was traveling at high speed. Zhao Lin informed Lan Cheng that he was already very close to him. He was going to go with him to the Blue Star. He also revealed that Akatome and his people were not insignificant. He was worried that Lan Cheng would go alone and end up being an offering. Lan Cheng began to gaze toward the ground and with a serene expression mentioned that if this time they managed to successfully rescue Lu Sheng, he was going to share with Zhao Lin the enormous favor that Lu Sheng owed him. At the same time, at the bottom of the sea, Lu Sheng sat on the ground and concentrated, making his martial spirit emerge from his body. The violet crystal humanoid figure of Lu Sheng emitted strange white undulations. The entire crystal figure was transforming into white, and then another transformation began. This time the white figure began to turn black. It was the humanoid figure with a black scythe of level 11 according to the crystal contemplation method. One of the inheritances from Duan Yifeng's level 15 divine crystal Tao. Lu Sheng let out a sigh. His eyes widened in surprise. He couldn't believe that the level jump was so terrifying. From level 8 he had gone up to level 11. His martial strength had reached level 11. But he couldn't understand what came next. He didn't know if his current level was too low, realizing that everything else would only be unlocked when he fully raised all his levels. Lu Sheng stood up and wiped off his pants using his hand. Now came the external martial body. energy. His previous understanding of the Tao of stars was too difficult. He believed that the diagram of immortal cell networks and stellar channels that he had created was quite good, but now saw that it was full of flaws and immature. To achieve it, he had to destroy and rebuild from scratch. Lu Sheng closed his eyes and clenched his fist. He extended his hand and a flash ran through his entire body. The immortal cells began to manifest. Then all the cells in his body exploded in unison, causing him terrible pain. An ordinary martial artist would already be hopelessly dead. But Lu Sheng was different. His martial body was being frantically reconstructed. Tendons and muscles grew one by one. Bones regenerated centimeter by centimeter. The entire skeleton shone with a radiant color, as if it were made of pure gold. Lu Sheng opened his mouth and began to scream in agony. Several seconds later, he descended to the ground. His eyes began to shine with excitement and a strange energy began to emerge from his body. He had achieved it. He decided to call this Supreme Bone. It didn't matter if someone mocked him. He wasn't going to change the name, and he also wouldn't use the name Stellar Immortal Body anymore. With a smile, Lu Sheng clenched his fist. From now on his constitution would be called Supreme Stellar Body, the Earth, and the 8 extremes of the universe. With eyes shining with joy, Lu Sheng stood up, clenched his fist, and with a smile declared himself as the supreme being of heaven and earth. Lu Sheng stuck out his tongue and with an embarrassed gaze began to touch his head with his hand. He realized that he was being very childish, but luckily he was in the depths of the sea. If he had said that in front of someone, he would have died of embarrassment. He decided to get excited alone in secret. His eyes widened seriously as something caught his attention, realizing that something was not right. While blue martial energy was emerging from his body, with a serious expression, Lu Sheng began to observe his hand. He felt that the immortal cells inside his body were growing uncontrollably. Inside his body, the immortal cells were duplicating, their number increasing at an alarming rate, and they devoured his energy like a hungry child who could not be satisfied. Lu Sheng focused and snapped his fingers, making pink energy appear around his hand. Not long after, a giant energy crystal descended into the depths of the sea right in front of Lu Sheng. Our boy began to observe it in silence. His eyes expanded with tranquility and he started walking toward it. The crystal began to shine intensely. This energy crystal weighed 500 kilograms that he had obtained during the tournament. He had thought it would last him a long time, but he never imagined that he would use up all his reserves of energy crystals at once. Lu Sheng reached out his hand and touched the energy crystal. He decided it was time to refine it. An explosion of energy destroyed the energy crystal, and Lu Sheng simply stood watching in silence. As little by little his energy was entering the energy crystal, Lu Sheng's eyes began to shine with joy and a smile spread across his face. He felt that the number of immortal cells had suddenly increased to 3,650. Lu Sheng's eyes widened with excitement, as he had even built with the immortal cells inside his body a complex and mysterious star map of the sun god domain. In that instant, he had surpassed by almost 1,000 times what he had achieved before. His energy began to enter the energy crystal, and a powerful wave of energy began to emerge from it, which started to spread throughout the bottom of the sea. The explosion created a curtain of smoke, and as it was slowly disappearing, Lu Sheng began to look toward the ground with a lost gaze. With a serene gaze, he couldn't help but smile since he had made the immortal cells develop into stars, and within those stars he had cultivated the golden bird. Not to mention that he also had the domains of Wang Hai and Duan Yifeng. Lu Sheng extended his hand and his attention was fixed on it, causing his eyes to widen in surprise. He had forgotten a small thing. In the palm of his hand there was a demonic eye, which was staring intently at our boy. He knew that he could not abandon the path of alien cells. Maybe he could use them to understand information from the dark side of the universe, and perhaps they would become the key to breaking through stagnation in the future. Lu Sheng couldn't help but smile and his eyes filled with confidence, as it was now time to begin with his martial seal and his martial face. With a serene gaze, Lu Sheng brought his hands together. Although he had deduced with his Master 5 complete paths up to level 15, and even one path to level 16. That was still just a floating castle. He still had to ascend from level 9. Our boy relaxed and closed his eyes. He understood that mortals sought the gods and warriors sought themselves. His true martial face had to be based on himself, with a face identical to his own, for he proclaimed himself as the god. Green energy appeared around his body, and little by little Lu Sheng began to float. He knew that the body of the martial phase was going to be created with the path of the divine crystal, with the divine crystal as body. Lu Sheng extended his hands and green energy began to circulate throughout his body regarding the matter of the path. He decided to use the path of the star as his eyes, and his master's natural path as a robe. Lu Sheng focused, and a powerful martial energy began to emerge from his body. He was going to use the crystal as a body, the golden bird as eyes, the four symbols as a robe, and the various paths as a curtain. Lu Sheng opened his eyes, and his mind filled with curiosity as something caught his attention. He decided to summon his martial aspect, body of the martial aspect of the four extremes of flame of the true martial god. Lu Sheng's energy emerged from the sea and shot up into the sky. Meanwhile, in Dragon Realm, Iji's martial spirit that had a demon form began spewing fire from its mouth and destroying everything in its path. The eyes of the city's inhabitants filled with fear. They began to flee and call for help. While Iji's eyes were shining with evil, he extended his hand and with a smile asked them to stop hiding. While everyone was running for their lives, not long after, Zheng Yu arrived in the city, and she couldn't help but feel furious upon seeing how powerful Iji was. The other martial saints also arrived in the city. Tan Zhongwu, who had his hands behind his back, began to gaze at Iji in silence. Zheng Yu clenched her fists and with an angry expression revealed that this was the third city destroyed by Iji. She knew that if they didn't do something, the entire Dragon Kingdom would be reduced to ruins. Tan Zhongwu's eyes filled with seriousness. He knew they could not keep running. With an expression full of determination, he began to stare at Iji and drew his sword. Like gods among men, they had to assume the responsibilities of gods among men, and even if they could only stop the evil spear for an instant, they had to do it without hesitation. With his face covered in sweat, the warrior who was behind Zhang Yu extended his hand and with an expression full of fear, remembered that Lu Sheng had surpassed the martial saint. He asked if Lu Sheng still hadn't come out of seclusion. Zhang Yu's attention was fixed on Iji. With a calm expression, she said that Lu Sheng still had not come out of his seclusion. Tang Zhongyu swung his sword forcefully and decided not to force the warriors who wanted to wait to fight. He gathered momentum and began to advance quickly toward Iji. He made it clear that he could also face a powerful enemy like a martial saint, and even if he died in the act, he would not regret it. While Iji's martial spirit was flying in the sky, Tang Zhongyu shot toward it. Zheng Yu began to observe silently. She could not believe what her eyes were seeing. She took out her mobile phone, turned to the others, and with a calm expression revealed that Martial Saint Minju had already entered into combat, and as one of the guardian martial saints of the Dragon Realm, she also had to do so. She had already informed Lady Dong and asked her to urge Master Lu Sheng to come out of seclusion. She made it clear that they were all martial saints from different nations, so she was not going to force them to join the battle. She only hoped they understood that if the lip falls, the teeth will not survive. The martial saints clenched their fists and remained silent. Zheng Yu leapt forward and began advancing toward Iji. The eyes of the martial saint, who had a scar on his face, filled with fury. He knew that this was no longer a matter of each country's interests. Upon hearing this, everyone's attention turned to him. Everyone felt frustrated and began to think about the blue star. Without losing another second, all the martial saints were filled with determination and began to fly toward Iji. They were willing to fight for the blue star. Seeing this, the citizens couldn't help but feel joyful and relieved. With eyes full of tears, one of them began to point toward the sky and revealed that the martial saints had come to save them. The bald man couldn't help but cry and thought they were saved. A tear of emotion appeared in Iji's eye. He began to crack his fingers and felt moved to see that finally the martial saints had deigned to come out. But then his eyes began to shine with evil, and with a smile he decided to kill them. While little by little the martial saints were getting closer, he extended his hand and couldn't help but smile. Iji's martial spirit attacked them forcefully, and as the scene shifts, we can see that on the coast of Ninghai there was a fishing boat. Inside the ship, there was a family who was watching television attentively. The television began to show how all the martial saints were being massacred. Upon seeing this, the father felt fear, now that not even all the martial saints in the world had been able to stand up to Iji. He didn't know who was going to save them now. With eyes shining with determination, the son clenched his teeth and grabbed his trident. The father's attention fixed on him and his eyes widened in surprise and confusion. The son wanted to fight, but the father extended his hand and made it clear that the monster Iji hadn't even been defeated by a level 9 martial saint. His son had only been training for a few years. He couldn't believe he thought he was Ultraman reincarnated. He promised that if his son ran away again, he would give him a beating. Upon hearing this, the son turned around and his eyes filled with fear. Just then, something caught his attention, and his face turned pale with shock, causing his jaw to drop. With a surprised expression, he asked his father to turn around. With a confused expression, the father decided to obey. Near the ship, a tornado of martial energy appeared and began to sweep away everything in its path. With his face full of fear, the father knelt before the tornado and thought that the Dragon King was furious. He began to beg for forgiveness. The son who was standing next to him remained watching it in silence. His eyes widened in confusion as he could see a person inside the tornado. With a furious gaze, the father clenched his fist and asked his son to stop saying nonsense. The tornado disappeared, revealing someone dazzling. As the curtain of smoke was fading, someone stepped out with their foot. The father's attention fixed on them and his eyes widened in fear and surprise. This person was none other than Lu Sheng. While his body was releasing martial fire, Lu Sheng's eyes began to shine with rage and the father thought that he was a god. Lu Sheng put his hands into his pockets and while his body was releasing martial fire, he began to fly through the sky toward the city. His eyes began to shine with seriousness. He extended his hand and fixed his attention, realizing that he could no longer continue gathering power. If he continued, he would completely exhaust the energy of heaven, earth, and nature of his planet, which would cause his world to fall into absolute silence. It was already night and the sky was full of stars. With a calm expression, Lu Sheng began to contemplate the precious sky and sank into his thoughts. It was just as Lan Chen had said, the small blue planet could no longer contain him, and the vast stellar universe was going to be his stage from now on. Our boy closed his eyes and clenched his fist tightly. He didn't know if with the power he had now, he could destroy a planet with a single blow. He realized that he was still far from being able to destroy a planet, since a planet wasn't like an egg, where breaking the shell would make the liquid spill out. He knew that the inside of the planet was the most resistant part. His eyes widened with joy and his attention focused on his fist. He was getting carried away. He had just reached level 9 and was already thinking about destroying planets. At that moment, the voice of someone asking for help began to sound in his head. Lu Sheng started to gaze toward the ground and his eyes widened in fear and confusion upon noticing that many voices were asking for help. He became curious to know what was happening. Lu Sheng was able to see one of the cities that was being attacked by Aji's army. The ground was filled with corpses and a mother with tears in her eyes was hugging her daughter. Now that even the martial saints had been defeated, no one knew who would be able to save them. With faces full of fear and despair, the survivors opened their mouths and began to scream for help. Upon hearing this, Lu Sheng's eyes widened in surprise and his jaw dropped in shock. Our boy closed his eyes and concentrated, causing blue martial energy to begin emerging from his body. He decided to activate his spiritual energy. Lu Sheng's energy began expanding throughout the area, scanning all the terrain. Lu Sheng was so strong that his energy began to expand throughout the country, until several seconds later, it covered the entire planet. He had planned to scan the whole planet using his spiritual energy. Somewhere else was Aji holding Zheng Yu, who was injured in the head. While Aji's eyes were shining with evil, with a smile, he extended his hand and revealed that the guardian gods in whom humans trusted were nothing but weaklings. Aji tightly grabbed Zheng Yu by the head. Her face was full of wounds and the mask she wore was broken. No matter how many times Aji experienced this sensation, it always made him enjoy it greatly. Aji opened his mouth and started laughing since he always found satisfaction in seeing how the natives of an inferior civilization trembled before an overwhelming power, with their faces full of fear. He approached Zheng Yu and with an evil smile, called the humans weak but stubborn. Zheng Yu, who was injured, did not say a single word. She knew she could do nothing. His eyes began to shine with rage because if it weren't for the bet he had with his two friends, he could continue enjoying destroying the planet for another month. He grabbed her head tightly and with a serious gaze decided to repeat it one last time, giving them the order to hand over all the planet's resources. His eyes filled with evil and a confident smile spread across his face as he made it clear that, otherwise, he would destroy all civilizations on the planet at a rate of 1 city per hour and kill everyone. Zheng Yu was so injured that she lost consciousness. Aji let go of her head and asked them to hurry up and bring all the planet's resources. Zheng Yu's body began to descend from the sky until it crashed into the ground. Aji mentioned that destroying civilizations was also a rather tedious and boring task. Zheng Yu's body collapsed forcefully against the ground, shattering it into pieces. Upon seeing this, everyone panicked, knowing they were doomed. Just then, a man began to point toward the sky and with a surprised expression asked everyone to look. They all raised their heads and began to look toward the sky, causing their eyes to widen in confusion and surprise. Their jaws dropped in shock since no one knew what was happening. Iji began to stare at them with a serious gaze and couldn't help but wonder why they were all looking at him. He didn't know if they were no longer afraid of dying. His eyes widened in fear and surprise, realizing that they weren't looking at him but were looking at something that was above his head. Just then, a powerful burst of martial energy began to descend from the sky toward Iji. He turned around and upon seeing this, his eyes filled with confusion, leaving him in shock. Iji's attention was fixed on it. He could not help but feel fear since he did not know what was happening. His eyes began to shine with surprise and his jaw dropped when realizing that it was not a burst of energy but a hand, a giant hand. A powerful martial hand made of golden energy appeared and began to descend toward Iji. Compared to it, Iji looked like an ant. He was confused as he did not know how it was possible for someone so powerful to exist on this planet. The finger of the martial spirit began to forcefully descend toward Iji as the attack was approaching. He put his arms over his head and with a furious gaze realized that the martial spirit was very powerful. He did not know who the user was. Using all his power, Iji tried to stop the attack. But his eyes widened in fear. He could not help but start screaming in rage since he wasn't even able to stop the attack. Several martial energies began to emerge from the hand, killing Iji instantly. Iji was furious since even at the moment of his death, he could not know who the user was. The attention of the Marshal of the West was fixed on the martial hand and his eyes were filled with surprise. He could not believe that Iji, a fierce and unstoppable alien invader, had died in an instant. The eyes of the Marshal of the Central District widened with joy. The martial hand had crushed Iji as if he were a mosquito. He did not know what had happened. The face of the other Marsical was filled with sweat and joy. He couldn't help but wonder if the gods really existed, but he quickly convinced himself that they did. He was sure that a deity had manifested. The Jade Emperor had not stood idly by and had come to save them. With a smile, the warriors raised their fists and began to celebrate Iji's death, and even though they had no idea what had happened, they were joyful. Jingyu, whose body was full of blood and wounds, sat on the ground and rested one hand on it, her attention fixed on the sky and her eyes filled with tears of happiness. She didn't know how the battle had ended so suddenly. She lifted her head and her eyes filled with curiosity. She did not know who had been the one who had killed Iji. In the sky a curtain of smoke formed and while it was disappearing, the figure of someone began to appear. Not long after, a warrior appeared and above him, a powerful fire phoenix began to flap its wings. The warrior clenched his fists and began to gaze toward the ground in silence. At first she thought he was a god, but then she realized that the silhouette was quite familiar. Her eyes widened in surprise and tears as she realized that it was Lu Sheng. Our boy descended gracefully to the ground and began to walk toward her. With a serene expression, Lu Sheng took her by the hands, began to look into her eyes and realized that she had suffered a lot. Jingyu remained silent, not knowing what to say. Lu Sheng took her by the hand and helped her stand up. A group of injured warriors began walking toward them. The attention of the purple-haired man was fixed on Lu Sheng, and his eyes filled with surprise. He could not believe that Lu Sheng had killed Iji without knowing if he had reached level 9. In the Lu family mansion, the eyes of the sister who was watching TV widened in surprise. She put her hands over her mouth and asked if it really was Lu Sheng. The attention of the parents who were standing behind focused on the TV, and their minds filled with curiosity. With a confused gaze, the mother put her hand over her mouth and couldn't help but sweat. She couldn't believe that Lu Sheng was so great. The father's eyes widened in confusion and he couldn't help but be left open-mouthed. At the same time, Lu Sheng's friend was also watching TV. She started to sweat upon seeing that Lu Sheng had defeated Iji. The master, who had a beard and was sitting watching TV, began to stroke his beard and felt surprised upon seeing Lu Sheng. Liu Kaiming clenched his fists and went into shock. He couldn't believe that Lu Sheng was the god of war. With eyes shining with joy, Lu Sheng extended his hands and with a smile apologized for arriving late, explaining that he had just come out of seclusion. All the warriors began to observe our boy in silence, not knowing what to say. Jingyu, who had her eyes closed, began to ponder. An enemy whom none of them, the martial saints, had been able to defeat had been crushed by Lu Sheng without him even seeing it. She considered that absurd, too absurd, since not even the evil spear knew who had killed it. She wondered if Lu Sheng was still human and if it was reasonable for someone who had just reached level 9 to be able to kill a peak level 10. She approached Lu Sheng and with a curious gaze asked what height his martial spirit had. Upon hearing her voice, Lu Sheng's attention focused on her and his eyes filled with surprise. Lu Sheng extended his hand and with a serene gaze mentioned that he had not yet tried to fully unleash his martial spirit, because drawing power from the heavens and the earth was too immense and could destroy the foundations of the blue planet. He had to go with Lan Cheng to obtain more advanced resources before he could know. Zheng Yu stood up and remained silent. With a joyful gaze, the southern marshal raised his fist and declared that Lu Sheng was the god of war and the savior of humanity. The central district marshal began to gaze at Lu Sheng in silence. They had finally witnessed the birth of history, and according to them, Lu Sheng was very powerful. The eyes of the black-haired man widened in confusion upon realizing that the handsome Lu Sheng was none other than the legendary martial saint of Dragon Nation. Upon hearing this, everyone's attention turned to our boy. They all started running toward him. Seeing this, Lu Sheng panicked. Everyone surrounded Lu Sheng and raised their fists, saying that he was the strongest. Our boy's eyes filled with surprise. He didn't know what was happening. Thanks for watching Vivify Recaps. If you enjoyed it, hit like, subscribe, and drop your next recap request in the comments. See you in the next one.